What if one of the oldest surviving lineages in Europe didn't come from Greece or Rome or the legendary Celts, but from a people many barely recognize today? A people who lived before city-states, before empires, before written alphabets. A people whose culture faded, whose languages vanished, whose monuments crumbled, but whose bloodline never disappeared. Because when scientists began analyzing ancient DNA from the Western Balkans, they found something shocking. They found continuity, real, measurable genetic continuity stretching back thousands of years. They found traces of an ancient population that somehow survived waves of conquest, invasion, migration, collapse, and rebirth. A population older than most of Europe's famous civilizations. They found the Illyrians. But to understand why this discovery shook historians, we have to go back, not a few hundred years, but thousands, long before the word Europe meant anything, long before written records. Back to a world of scattered tribes, stone tools, and migration routes carved by ice and survival. The Western Balkans, modern Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, parts of Croatia, Bosnia, Slovenia, and Serbia were home to some of Europe's earliest settlers. Archaeology shows people living there continuously since the Stone Age, not arriving from elsewhere, not replacing someone before them. Living there, adapting, evolving. For most ancient cultures, time erased their genetic footprint. Empires came and went, armies marched, populations mixed or vanished. But Illyrian DNA stayed surprisingly stable. Scientists didn't expect that. A crossroads region like the Balkans should show more genetic turnover. Too many migrations passed through, too many wars, too many changes. And yet, when researchers compared skeletons from Illyrian-era graves to modern genetic samples from the region, something extraordinary appeared. The core ancestry matched far more closely than anyone predicted. Not identical, not pure, but connected, deeply, undeniably connected. This doesn't mean modern Balkan people are the same as ancient Illyrians in culture or identity. Cultures shift, languages die, borders move. That's normal. But it does mean the genetic roots of the region run far deeper than history books once suggested. Imagine this visually. You're looking at a map of Europe, and every population is a color on the canvas. Most regions shift dramatically over time as new migrations arrive. But the Western Balkans, that region remains surprisingly similar in core ancestry, even as everything else around it changes. And that continuity tells us something profound. The Illyrians may have been among Europe's earliest truly indigenous populations. But who were they? The problem is, the Illyrians didn't leave many writings behind. Almost everything we know about them comes from outsiders, mostly Greeks and Romans, and outsiders rarely describe their neighbors kindly. But even through that bias, patterns emerge. The Illyrians were mountain people, coastal traders, sailors, farmers, warriors in tribal confederations. They built hill forts, worshipped local deities, and spoke a language we still don't fully understand. They traded across the Adriatic and fought fiercely to defend their lands. To Greeks, they were mysterious and rugged. To Romans, they were dangerous and unpredictable. To archaeologists today, they are a puzzle with half its pieces missing. But DNA is filling in those gaps. For instance, ancient Illyrian samples show a mix of ancestral components linked to early European hunter-gatherers and the first Neolithic farmers who migrated into Europe about 8,000 years ago. Over time, these groups blended into what we now call the Illyrians. And unlike in many other regions, that blend didn't get replaced by incoming populations. It stayed. That's what makes the Illyrians special. They're a genetic survivor story. Even when new waves of people entered the Balkans, from Indo-European migrations to later movements in the Roman era and medieval period, the core ancestry remained, absorbing but not disappearing. It's like watching a river flow while keeping its same source, no matter how many smaller streams merge into it. The water changes slightly, but the identity of the river stays intact. And here's the twist. Many modern Balkan peoples still carry a clear genetic connection to these early Illyrian groups. Not a direct cultural descent, culture rarely survives intact, but a biological one. This doesn't prove any ancient claims of nationhood, it doesn't rewrite borders, it doesn't hand ownership of history to any modern group. It simply shows that human ancestry runs deeper than politics or myths. That ordinary people carry extraordinary timelines inside their DNA. If you look closely, the Illyrians left behind subtle traces of their world. Their weapons show excellent metalwork. Their jewelry shows symbolism we barely understand. Their burials show hierarchy, trade networks, and rituals lost in time. Their fortresses cling to mountain ridges that still overlook valleys today. And in all these fragments, there's a picture of a people who were both ancient and advanced in their own way. A people shaped by harsh landscapes and coastal winds. A people whose way of life demanded resilience, cooperation, and adaptability. But despite their strengths, the Illyrians didn't leave a single unified identity behind. They were many tribes, many cultures, many dialects, and when Rome eventually conquered the region, Illyrian culture fragmented. Some tribes adapted, some resisted, some disappeared into the empire. Within a few centuries, the Illyrians were no longer recognized as a distinct civilization. Their names faded, their customs faded, their languages faded. Yet their DNA survived, and that survival reveals something universal, something bigger than the Illyrians themselves. Civilizations may vanish, but people live on. Empires collapse, but families continue. Borders change, but ancestry persists quietly through generations. There's an old line that says, "Roots are older than branches," and nowhere is that more true than in the story written inside the Illyrian genome. Because the Illyrians remind us of something we often forget. History isn't just written in books, it's written in bones, in genes, in us. When we look at ancient DNA, we're not just studying the past, we're meeting the people who carried humanity through fire, drought, war, and time itself. People who walked the same mountains, ate the same grains, breathed the same coastal air that modern communities still do today. And the deeper scientists dig, the more they confirm a remarkable truth. The Illyrians were not a mysterious disappearance, they were a transformation. They didn't vanish, they evolved into the mosaic of identities of the Balkans today. This is what makes the Illyrian story so powerful. They're proof that human history is layered, not linear. That even when cultures collapse, their legacy can survive in the most intimate way imaginable, inside the people alive today. So as new DNA studies continue, as more ancient samples are analyzed, as technology grows sharper and clearer, we may discover even more threads connecting modern populations to these early Europeans. And with every discovery, the story of Europe becomes richer, older, more complex, and more awe-inspiring. If this kind of deep-time storytelling fascinates you, where DNA meets archaeology, where science meets mystery, there's so much more coming. We're just scratching the surface of humanity's oldest chapters. And if you want to keep exploring these ancient connections with us, you're in the right place. Stick around, because at GenealogyX, we're diving deeper into the roots of civilizations every week. There are still secrets buried in the past, and we're just getting started.